the Executive Director of Portland State University's Center for Global Leadership in Sustainability. She's a recognized leader in the development of sustainable business models, brands, social movements, and food systems. Before Alison Dennis's PSU gig, she served as Director of Sustainability at Burgerville, a $70 million Pacific Northwest-based regional restaurant broadly recognized for its sustainable business practices. And if you don't know about Burgerville's sustainable business practices, you should look it up. It's kind of amazing. So what does it take to lead transformational systems change? Alison will share best practices from leaders, innovators, and entrepreneurs who are changing business, and she'll translate them into practical calls for action to create a sustainable and desirable food system. Please help me welcome Alison Dennis for her talk, Sustainable Business Now, what the food movement can learn from today's business leaders and innovators.
Thanks, Alison, for that introduction, and thanks to all of you. Keith or someone in the back, are you out there to help me when I call out next slide? Fabulous, thanks. So I promise I'm going to talk about sustainable business now and how that relates to food systems, but first I want to talk a little bit about art. My favorite place in the whole world is in this slide. It's the Secretariat of Public Education building in Mexico City. I love being surrounded by the murals of Diego Rivera, another fan in the crowd. And I'm especially moved by his murals depicting workers and workers' rights issues. I love travel, I love field trips, and I love murals. I love the power murals have. I believe when we paint the truth about ourselves and our ideals on public walls, our ideals gain strength and the walls start to come down. When I was applying for colleges, one of the pieces that I included in my art portfolio was photographs of a Peaceable Kingdom mural that I had painted on my bedroom walls when I was 13, which, if nothing else, tells you that I have the kind of parents who let their kids paint on walls. And so my whole childhood and into college, I had alternative educational experiences, and as a result, I was frequently asked questions along the lines of, okay, Alison, so you're having this idyllic childhood and educational experience now, but what is going to become of you when you get out into the real world? And so this got me very curious about what is this ominous-sounding real world, and why is it that we seem so willing as a society in our educations, followed by our careers, to give those things up in proliferation of the idea of the real world. What happens if we have the courage to dream big about our ideal world, our ideal selves, ideal communities, families, workplaces, food systems? And what happens very practically when we start to take down the internal and external barriers that are in the way of us living and working together as a peaceable kingdom? Next slide. So now at Portland State and in the business sector, both as a practitioner and educator, it's these same questions that continue to drive my interest in business as a vehicle for change and food systems especially as a vehicle for broader systems change. Next slide. And I'm not alone. At Portland State and at progressive business schools everywhere, right now we're attracting a new kind of student. They're students who see a pressing need for business to play a leading role in solving the world's most pressing issues. They see themselves as leaders and future leaders of that change, and they're choosing to study and work and live in Portland for something more than business as usual. The classes I teach for Portland State are definitely something other than business as usual. I spend no time in the classroom. All of my courses are entirely field-based, both locally as well as internationally. And so what I thought I would do today is share with you some of the takeaways I'm gleaning from these field trips, both locally and internationally, and especially the ones I think have the biggest application to the future of our food system. Next slide. So here's our first field trip stop. This is Zeba Design. Zeba is One of the most innovative design firms in the world. They have international offices, many countries worldwide, but their corporate headquarters are actually right here in Portland, Oregon, just a few blocks from this neighborhood, in this neighborhood. Ziba, one of the services they provide for their clients is they do a lot of work, futurist work, kind of predicting the most compelling design trends so that their clients can stay on the leading edge. And when I bring my classes and students to talk to Ziba, here's what they want my students to know. Here's what I want you to know about what Ziba has to say. They are not forecasting, they're just declaring that sustainability is the new normal. Sustainability is the new normal. So they're not thinking about it or tracking it anymore as a fad or an emerging trend. It's mainstreaming from their perspective, and the kinds of clients that are coming and asking for them to help embed their products, including food system and food sector products, with socially and environmentally responsible attributes. They're mainstream brands that you would see in any grocery store, you'd see in anyone's kitchen cabinet. So sustainability is the new normal. For food, I think there are two big ramifications there. As in general, I think food can be a slow industry to evolve. We tend to be pretty traditional. And so if you're working in the food industry in a sphere that hasn't made this connection yet, Ziba would say the writing's on your wall. And then flip side of that, for those of us who represent small brands or local brands that are differentiating around some of the most common sustainability attributes like fresh local sourcing or composting and recycling, those kinds of attributes, we need to keep doing those, but we also need to recognize we're going to have a lot of company in the very near future. So to stay on the leading edge, we need to keep redefining what's the next level of that, what's the next meaningful way to deepen the connection between me and my consumer base. Next slide. Aren't those grapes beautiful? So this is Adelsheim Vineyards. This is a family-owned and operated Willamette Valley, Oregon winery. The Adelsheim family, really some of the early pioneers in this area, both on the sustainable agriculture front and just championing the development of our sustainable wine industry here. The quote I want to share with you is one from Chad Vargas. He's the vineyard manager at Adelsheim, and I love this quote. He was talking about just his approach to sustainable agriculture. He said that he strives to be the kind of farmer who keeps his feet in the vines and his nose in the grapes. I love that. He keeps his feet in the vines and his nose on the grapes. So very practically, he was talking about just being the kind of farmer who gets down off the tractor and develops an intimate understanding of not just what he's growing, but the larger ecosystem it's working within, and how the changes and decisions he makes impact the health of the system as a whole. But I hear a much bigger, broader call to action in this idea. Where am I within my sphere of influence, whether that's as an individual, as a business leader, a community leader, getting down off the tractor and keeping my feet in the vines and my nose in the grapes, really being curious every day about how my choices impact the health of the larger system. Next slide. This is a much bigger company. Welcome to Nike's world headquarters, located here in Beaverton, Oregon. When I take students to visit Nike, it's just the change is palpable. You can see the entire organization right now really rearranging the whole way they're approaching business, really looking at the idea of closed-loop systems and how Nike can decouple their future growth from any current dependency on increasingly scarce resources. So decoupling growth from scarce resources. At Nike, this shows up in terms of innovating new kinds of materials, innovating new kinds of product manufacturing and manufacturing partnerships across the apparel industry, and including collaborating with their competitors to make it possible in the future to make new shoes and new clothing entirely out of old shoes and old clothing, including figuring out how we get people to bring their old shoes and clothing back so that nothing is going to waste. Great to follow Heather just on that theme. And within food, I think the the programs Heather was describing at New Seasons are great examples of that. I think this is an area, closed loop systems, where food is actually ahead of the curve, and some of our early innovations are, they're familiar, they're not complicated, and so they're easy touch points for all of us as citizens to get involved. So just a few examples would be closed loop systems in food would be building on early successes related to collecting waste that gets turned into healthy fertilizer that gets put on the ground to grow more food, or programs where we collect our used cooking oil to turn that into biofuels that end up fueling the tractor that grows the potatoes that make the French fries that go into the oil. So looking at those kinds of early successes we've had in food, closed loop systems, and really leveraging and building that as a strength that's coming out of the food industry, closed loop system innovation. Next slide, please. So those were some local examples. I'm going to share a couple of examples from my work in India. So this is, I took this picture at a school in Hyderabad, India. I was with students who were doing some research for Tom's Shoes, who was just gearing up to begin shoe-giving programs in India, starting in Hyderabad. For those that aren't familiar with the Tom's Shoes brand, it's a Texas-based company, and it's a cause-based marketing kind of branded company. For every pair of Tom's shoes that is sold, they give a pair of shoes to a child in need somewhere in the world, and they've just started in the last year doing giving programs in India. So a lot of compelling work, compelling to be on the front lines of this work. So a lot of takeaways I could share. I think the one I want to really focus on today is this idea of making direct connections between the people who can afford and choose to purchase our products and services, and people who can't afford to purchase those products. In the Tom's example, they're looking at that related to shoe access. In the food industry, I think we have an even more compelling opportunity on the table. What is possible when the food system begins working together profoundly and collaboratively to make direct connections between people who can afford to purchase food and people who cannot afford to purchase food? What if we have all of the resources and innovation we need collectively within the global food system right now to tackle some of the world's most pressing food-related issues, including hunger, including water access, including obesity? Next slide. Here's another example from India. This is SKS microfinancing. I took this picture just a couple weeks ago. I'm participating in a circle meeting of women that SKS is supporting with microfinancing loans. SKS is looking at tackling the issue of the over 800 million people living in poverty in India, living on less than US $2 a day, and seeing that by including women as part of that solution, by giving them microloans and enabling them to start small entrepreneurial businesses, that's one of the most direct ways they can help shift as many families as possible above that poverty definition line. Next slide. And just building on the same theme in a different way, this is a local model. This is a worker from Central City Concern, which has both nonprofit social programs helping homeless and especially those recovering from drug addiction regain skills and self-sufficiency. And then they have for-profit models of what they do, where as people move up through their programs, there are employment opportunities through Central City Concern. They lead Portland's Portland Clean and Safe program. So it's Central City people you see in those neon vests in downtown Portland, cleaning our streets, cleaning our public restrooms, managing our public parks, doing graffiti abatement, that sort of thing. And so in this case, they're looking at some other disenfranchised groups of people, in this case, homeless and recovering drug addicts, and including them as part of the solution. So that's the takeaway I really want to share out of these two models. How can the food system include everyone as part of the solution. In my work at Burgerville, I got to kind of play in this area in terms of how can fast food eaters and fast food workers actually be on the leading side of solving some of the most pressing issues related to food. I think we have a lot of opportunities since we employ so many minimum wage people, since our work intersects with migrant workers. Who are we not including as creative players in solving the problems? We have a lot of opportunity to lead in food. Just one last image kind of as food for thought. An Oregon hazelnut tree, that's what those are, sustainably maintained, is able to stay productive and produce more hazelnuts for over 100 years. So what if we embrace sustainability as the new normal? What if we keep our feet in the vines and our noses in the grapes? What if we decouple the growth of our food system from scarce resources? We make the connection between people who can afford food and people who cannot afford food, and we include everyone as part of the solution. What if we have, as a global food system, sustainably maintained everything we need to solve some of the most pressing problems in the world, including hunger, clean water access, and obesity? What if we have everything we need and are actually capable of working and living together and feeding each other and nourishing each other to live as a peaceable kingdom? Next slide. Thanks very much.
Alison. And we might actually be on track to adjourn. Yeah, it was nice to make up just a couple minutes. It'd be great. But we do have a few minutes for Q&A. Who would like to be the first? Do I see a hand? Yes? Okay. We've got somewhere in the back. Coming.
Hi, my name is Francesca, and I am a CSA coordinator and manager at Sauvie Island Organics. And so we work really hard to produce a high-quality product for the Portland community. We have a CSA scholarship program, so trying to make that link between the people who can afford and not afford. We work closely with urban gleaners. We donate regularly to them. They're coming to pick up produce from us weekly. We drop it off there. And I'm wondering, what do you see as that next step, the next connection? We're a for-profit business, so it's really important for us to continue to be able to pay our employees well, offer them benefits, all those types of things. But we really do care about this, making the link between people who can afford to buy our product and the people who can't. So I was just wondering if you have any ideas about that.
Great, thanks.
So starting with the big picture, I think that's where the most important change is going to happen. So it's actually our power as consumers that is going to drive the rapid mainstreaming of infrastructure to support sustainably raised food in all aspects of our food system. So just as much as I want people to sign up for your CSA and shop at the farmer's market, I also think we need to be careful not to spend all of our time on our high horses as consumers. And when we see big business making steps in the right direction, we need to either vote with our dollars, vote with our comment cards, write customer feedback that encourages all kinds of businesses of all sizes to move it forward. It's going to be those changes, the big mainstreaming changes that are actually going to create the financial tipping point for the very best food in the US and the world to be the most affordable food in the world as well. So we need to be working it from both ends.
I have a follow-up question on that, but I'd rather give preference to people who we haven't heard from.
We can chat in the green room.
Yeah, we could chat in the green room, but that was very provocative. But do I have one more hand, or do you want me to vamp? Okay, great. Go ahead. Yeah, wait for a mic.
I was intrigued by your statement that they said sustainability is basically the way it's happening.
Yeah.
And if you talk about sustainability, there's this movement to create sustainable communities across the United States. whenever you try this, we always have this wonderful chorus of people that think we're going to take away their houses and their cars. And so they're the anti-Agenda 21 people. And then when you try and talk sustainability with large agribusiness, particularly corporate farms, they basically say, oh, that's such a lovely idea, but it's not possible. We cannot feed 9 billion people and be sustainable. And so I'm wondering what your answer to that is, because I agree with you, but these compelling arguments come up, and it's always, well, that's in a perfect world. And my thing is, well, I want to live in a perfect world. And so what is your answer to people that either think that you're a big brother communist, or an idealist that it can't happen?
Great. Thanks for sharing all of that. I'm not sure this is an answer to your question. I can describe the approach I'm taking and experimenting with as I encounter those similar kinds of scenarios. So in my business work as a practitioner, it's largely been within the food industry, and I've worked at both scales, both working with some of the loveliest, smallest, most boutique local farms, as well as some of the biggest food companies in the US and the world. And I find I'm the most successful when I really steward the language I use and the invitations I create so that I'm, every opportunity I get, inviting everyone to be a part of the solution. When I get the response because of the way I chose to say something, or the way I chose to put a program or a product out there on the market, when I get the response that it's leaving some people feeling disenfranchised, like that product or program isn't for them, I know I have more work to do in how I launch things so that everyone can hear where their role is too. So what is the role of large-scale commodity agriculture in feeding the world, and how can we, for example, frame that invitation in a way where they see their role versus see that has nothing to do with them? I don't know the answer to how to phrase it, but I'm committed to staying engaged as a professional on questions like that until I get them right, until people really do feel authentically invited to help.
Very interesting, very thought-provoking. Thank you. We have time for one, I know at least one more, maybe two more, but definitely one more. You see any? Do you see hands? Let me know. It's a little hard to see. Ah, all right. We haven't heard from you. Thanks. Oh, wait. I think we did hear from you earlier, but that's okay. You raised your hand. Fantastic.
I have one question. One of the things that we're committed to doing and moving forward with the Thompson Okanagan region is developing a sustainability charter. And I'm just curious if you've seen any really good examples from any of your travels at the destination level.
At the destination level?
Yeah.
That's a great question. I'm not sure I have. You all can chat afterwards. It looks like she has some ideas for you. What I would say more broadly than that is I think you're taking the right approach in terms of not trying to invent the wheel from scratch and really looking for what are the best examples out there in terms of like cities, like size destinations, whatever it is that you're representing. Whenever I'm taking on something new, I always look to my colleagues and peers, both locally and more broadly, for the best of what they're doing. Heather Schmidt and I have worked really closely over the years, bouncing off ideas I choose. So find a peer group, find examples that are compelling, and even though I don't know the answer to your question, keep asking that question. That's a great one.
And speaking of Big Brother, I'm afraid I've gotten the word from Big Brother. We have to wrap it up to keep a little bit, slightly on time. We're a little bit over. Anne, are you going to be joining us in the Cascadian cuisine?
Alas, I will not.
Alas,
my
can you have social media?
Parents are waiting in the lobby. They're visiting from out of town.
How can they get in touch with you if
people
people still have questions?
The slide, I don't know if you can put back the last slide, but my email was there.
Okay,
and,
great. And of course you can contact
FoodWorx
FoodWorx and we can put you guys in touch. Thank you so much,
Thanks,
Alison Dennis.